Online gaming industry has recently come under fire for a whole host of reasons. There are charges that proliferate off the online gaming system are leading to young people being addicted and financial losses and in some cases suicides as well. Now, this has called for a need for a central level legislation to regulate the sector. The government, meanwhile, has now appointed the Ministry of Electronics and IT, or MeitY, as the nodal agency for online gaming in India. The draft rules are expected by January. The industry has welcomed this move by the union government. And to take this discussion forward, I'm now joined by Joy Bhattacharya, Director General of Federation of Indian Fantasy Sports, as well as Mr. Yash Sheel Srivastava, Managing Director, APAC for Coda Payments. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Bhattacharya, let me come to you first. A big move here by the centre. MeitY being made the nodal agency. We also now have esports being recognized as multi-sport events as per the government notification. Your first take on this development?
It's fantastic. I think it's really good news. And, as we know, the Prime Minister has been very keen on the AVGC sector. And this is a great first move because, amazingly, unlike most other industries, we've been crying out for central regulation. There's been too much ambiguity about understanding about the gaming sector. Now we have a clear nodal ministry. MeitY is our nodal ministry. We know what we have to deal with. We've had consultations with them. We have an understanding of what they want to do. And I think for good players, for players who are actually concerned about giving Indian citizens value for money, this is the most welcome move possible.
Let me then ask the supplementary question. The next trigger, of course, Mr. Bhattacharya, that we're watching for is the MeitY releasing those rules for consultation. Just a sense that given the scope of this issue, will designating rules be sufficient, or do we need a separate independent legislation that governs, regulates online gaming?
I think the government will be looking in future to move towards that, because, as we said, so many of our rules are governed by technology. Technology has moved far ahead of the lawmaking process in that sense. So, it'll always catch up. And I think technology is changing so fast that there's an important need for, self-regulation, self-regulatory authorities, ombudsmen to also work with the government. But this is a very fast-changing industry. But I think it's important, first and foremost, that the government has recognized that this is an important sector, a priority sector, and to make rules to make sure that the legal players, like the good fantasy sports operators in this country, have a framework they can work with, and to actually clear some of the ambiguity today there. Gaming, gambling, everything seems to come into one net, and we want to be very clear about what fantasy sport does, how it's operated, how it's played, and how it's played within this country. And I think the government, this is a very bold first step towards doing that. And I think it's excellent for the industry.
Sure. Yash, let's get you in on this conversation. You've had a bittersweet experience as far as India is concerned for Coda Payments. Tell us about your experiences, how you've been impacted by some of the changes that you've seen here as far as the gaming regulations are concerned. And finally, what would your suggestions be to the government, some red flags perhaps to keep in mind while we're formulating a framework in terms of rules?
Sure. I think I'd agree with Mr. Bhattacharya that it's a great first step. It's a momentous decision, and I'll come to that why. But it's still fairly early in the game. There's a lot to be done to get to a place where operators gaming intermediaries or fantasy sport operators can operate with a very clear legal framework. Because at this point, the only thing that's happened is a nodal ministry's gotten allocated, right? From here, we need to see how prescriptive that framework actually is when it comes to KYC, when it comes to de-addiction measures, when it comes to grievance redressal, all of that. From there, it translates into a federal law, and then it's incumbent on the states to create their own laws. How closely aligned with the framework would they be? And then from there, once great laws even get built, execution and enforcement is altogether a different ballgame. And there are enough biases and confusion about online gaming today, which means that enforcement will happen at a first stage. Then a lot of these things will be fought in the courts. And that's when we'll come to having all the proper precedents that are required for clear business continuity. So I think it's a long game here. Even from here, we should look at 36 to 48 months before which we really know how effective this entire move will be. But I think it's momentous for one reason. We've never had a law in this country when it comes to online gaming. We've got to 500 million users, but we don't have a law which clearly talks about online gaming, right? That's why this becomes important. The second thing is, at this
Sure.
point, there's far too much confusion between online games, which can be puzzles you play on your phone, versus gambling versus fantasy sports. And I think having like an umbrella law will help clear up most of this.
Sure. Mr. Bhattacharya, a point being made there by Yash that this is a good first step, but this is the first step of a very long journey, which could prove to be tedious. Just as a first step, how critical is it, as Yash was pointing out, we don't have a legal framework while we have as many as 500 million gaming users here in the country. How critical is it at the very inception to make that distinction in law, the distinction between a game of chance and a game of skill?
Regis, those are the things.
Mr. Bhattacharya, I believe you're on mute.
I think I'm clear now. I think those are the things that need to happen at the very start. And I think this is it's a moving target. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think that's what the government is doing. It's firstly, it's important of which ministry is also being chosen. That MeitY has been chosen means this is firmly in the technological sector. They look at it as a problem which is in the technological space and not in the content space. And I think that's an important first step. The next step is to look at it and say that, okay, codify the rules for the separate things. What is a game of chance? What's a game of skill? And third, there's a lot of other things which are also happening, which is that we all know that there are a lot of betting organizations which are operating by putting out ads in India and getting money transferred overseas. So clear, absolute clarity on those. Okay. And we believe that once there's a strong central framework and regulation, the states will come into place and they know that exactly what's done. Because the big problem is, given how the internet operates, having state-wise rules, which, as opposed to central rules, is really difficult for anyone to police. And once a center comes in and starts saying, okay, this is the framework on which the rules are based, I think it's fantastic for the industry.
Interesting. Let me take that across to Yash. Yash, coming back to you, let's take the example of Tamil Nadu. We've seen very recently a legislation that they brought out, struck down by the High Court. Subsequently, we had an ordinance and then another piece of legislation. In a federal structure like we have here in the country, especially since issues such as gambling fall under the state subject, how confident are you that a centralized approach will actually yield dividends within the states on the ground level?
So I think it's important to understand. I think what needs to be harmonized here is the importance of the AVGC sector, right? The fact that it can generate close to 2 million jobs over the next decade or so, and it can be close to a few $100 billion in net value added for the country, as well as one of the country's most important exports, makes it incumbent on both the center and the states to ensure that this industry is allowed to grow in a meaningful way. Every industry comes with its good actors and bad actors, with its pros and cons, but you need to build an ecosystem which is supportive for operators, intermediaries, societal groups, as well as the government to cooperate with each other, right? I think that's the genesis which we need. At this point, there are biases against online gaming. Everything is seen as gambling. Everything is seen as wrong in society. I think those perceptions need to change. And I think by creating what we've done right now, by taking center stage, by mentioning it in the budgets, by setting up a nodal ministry, I think we're setting the tone for what needs to be done. Otherwise, business continuity is something which always gets affected, because bans come in place, then investments go for a toss, then you're litigating this, which takes all the time in the world. I think that's the cycle we need to avoid for operators and intermediaries.
Sure, Yash. Thank you. We're running out of time, Mr. Bhattacharya, but I'll come back to you for a quick final comment. The biggest concern, however, that has emerged, and this was something also red flagged by the MOS, Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, where he said that no illegal services will be allowed. The concern, of course, raised by states is gambling, is frittering away of savings. That's the big concern here. What does the industry need to do to perhaps assuage some of these concerns with respect to gambling that states have raised?
I think it's not a question of so much a question of gambling. It's a question of defining what is a game of chance and a game of skill. And once you define that in fantasy sports, the way it operates, I mean, it is a completely different ballgame altogether. So for us, the first and important need is for the government to make these definitions and put it down centrally. And I think Tamil Nadu has tried their own definitions, and some may agree, some may not agree with it. But once the center does those legislations, once the center defines that this is what it is, I think the states will fall into place. And none of us, I mean, there is nobody here. Every legal operator in this country is against, a situation where it is addictive, it is dangerous. And none of these sports, the fantasy sports, no way fall into that category at all. So what we want to say is that we are happy legislation happens. We are happy that there's a nodal ministry. And most important, the more clarity we get, fantasy sport is the one place which is actually being looking to the center to say, put some rules, put some regulations, because that makes life a lot easier for every legal operator. And that's exactly what we're doing. And this first step of saying that, okay, MeitY is a nodal ministry and we're making some rules and we're putting them together is something that's important for us. Lots of work to do, as Yatish has said, but I think it's a fantastic first step.
Great. I'd like to thank both of our panelists for taking out their time and for sharing their thoughts with us. The consensus appears to be that this is, in fact, a great first step. This move has been welcomed of MeitY taking charge as the nodal ministry, but clearly this will be a long journey ahead as far as regulating the gaming industry is concerned. Thanks once again to both of our panelists for taking out time to speak to us. But with that, it's time now to slip into a very short break. Coming up on the other side, government is likely to... Welcome back. You're watching Business 360. Now, the market staged a sharp recovery on expiry day to end in the green. Nifty and Sensex ended 0.25% higher. The last hour of surge was led by financials, with the Nifty bank seeing gains of close to 1%. Mid-caps underperformed. However, for the December series, Nifty and Sensex saw cuts of over 1%, but mid-caps and banks outperformed to end with gains. Prashant Nair is joining us now with more details of the day's market action. Prashant.
A solid pullback from the day's lowest point, and it looked dramatically different by close. It's compared to the bulk of the session. Most of the move came in the last 60 minutes of trade. It was also, of course, futures and options expiry. The Nifty doing very well, ending practically at the high point of the day. The surge was powerful. Banks even better, and the Bank Nifty intraday sharp spike in the last 60 minutes was something to be seen. Broader market pullback, but the pullback as compared to the Nifty or the Bank Nifty was a little more feeble, but they ended higher. Large cap gainers included names like Bharti, iShares, State Bank of India. Nothing outsized, I mean, in terms of day-on-day returns, but there was a broader push higher that we saw. In the broader market, I mean, the action was action also actually changed in the last 1 hour. It was negative advanced market breadth when we started at 230 in the last hour, and it flipped to slightly marginally positive advanced decline by close. The Adani Group stocks on your screen all rallying. Names like Fact, Sharda Crop Chemicals, recent listings like Nykaa, Bikaji, Inox Green doing very well. KEC, AG's Chemicals, Skipper, BEML were some of the names which stood out. There were losses as well, but what went up, and that list of stocks which went up was a lot longer, and it went up with volumes, and I think that's what matters. Shriram Finance was lower, Shree Cements, Amara Raja, Kalyan Jewelers, Saregama were some of the other stocks which actually ended lower. Tomorrow, of course, is the last trading session for 2022, and it in a way has been uncharacteristically alive, the market. I mean, while volumes have been lower, and that's to be expected, but price action has not been dull. The Nifty now sits exactly at an important trend, rising trend line all the way from the lows of June, which is at about 18,200. A clear break above this level, I think, opens room for more upsides. Back to you.
Right, Prashant, thanks a lot for that. Now, the union government is planning sweeping changes to the insolvency and bankruptcy court. Sources tell us that the bankruptcy process could be split into two parts to ensure quicker resolution and fewer litigations. Sapna Das is here joining us with more details. Sapna.
Well, the government may have certain significant amendments in mind to the IBC. What could be under discussion is as follows. Number one, probably structuring a resolution plan in two parts, basically the bid and the distribution of money. Here, probably the suggestion is that the adjudicating authorities should give a quicker approval to bids once they come in from the COC. This will help the new promoter come into the picture immediately and not wait for the distribution of money to actually start. The money that's undisputed can be given out to stakeholders in the first stage itself, but the disputed part of the money can be kept separately in an escrow account, wait for the litigation to be over, and then that can be taken forward. So this is one. Second, introducing a challenge mechanism into the IBC. There has been a lot of discussion on this in the past as well. but not included in the law so far. So there is a serious consideration that this should be made part of IBC. This will help cut delays and also maximize the value of potential bids. Last but not the least, also, probably the government will need to clarify on the immunity already granted to new promoters under IBC. In the past, some courts have allowed fresh proceedings, legal proceedings against the new promoters. So this has raised questions in the minds of potential bidders. The government will need to clarify on this once again, because that will be very important and significant in giving comfort to potential bidders to come forward, to salvage companies under IBC. These are some of the proposals that we are given to understand. We have to wait and watch and see how all of this pans out.
Right, Sapna, thanks a lot for that update. Now, months after Maiden Pharma, another Indian pharmaceutical company finds itself in the dock. The Uzbekistan Health Ministry has claimed that 18 out of 21 children who were administered a cough syrup manufactured by the Indian company Marion Biotech have died. Now, the Uzbek government alleges that the Doc 1 Max, the cough syrup that was allegedly contaminated with the toxic substance ethylene glycol. The Uzbekistan government has also claimed that the syrup was given to children without a doctor's prescription and with doses that exceeded the standard for all children. The legal head of Marion Biotech has said that they will extend full support to the government inquiry.
देखो हमें भी अफसोस है कहते हैं अब किस वजह से डेथ हुआ अभी जो है गवर्नमेंट यहाँ इंक्वायरी कर रही है अंडर इन्वेस्टिगेशन है जो रिपोर्ट आएगी उसके बाद जो है रिपोर्ट आने पर जो है सही चीज़ें मालूम होंगी हमारी तरफ से कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है हमने गवर्नमेंट इंक्वायरी कर रही है है ना कहते हैं गवर्नमेंट का जो रिपोर्ट आएगी उस हिसाब से रिएक्ट करेंगे
सैंपल कलेक्ट किया है
हाँ गवर्नमेंट कर रही है लगी प्रोसेस में लगी हुई है हाँ जी
Uzbek authorities have not formally taken up the matter with us. Nevertheless, our embassy has contacted the Uzbek side and is seeking further details of their own investigation. And of course, we understand that legal action has been initiated by the Uzbek authorities against some people, including the local representative of the company there. And in that context, of course, we are extending necessary consular assistance to those individuals or individuals.
Abhimanyu Sharma is joining us now with more details. Abhimanyu, tell us, what are you picking up in terms of the investigations that are currently underway and what the company has to say on this issue?
Well, the company till now has expressed concern over the deaths which have taken place. It has expressed grief. It has also said that it has stopped the production of the said cough syrup for now. It has also stated that it is cooperating with all the authorities. It needs to be reminded that CDSCO as well as UP's drug control officers are currently inspecting Marion Biotech's office in Noida. The earlier inspection had taken place 2 days back on the 27th of December. Another round of inspection is on way. A minute inspection is being carried out and it's likely to end by today. Also, what sources had indicated till now that some action may only be taken only after a report is submitted, only after the investigation, the preliminary investigation is completed and the samples which were collected from Marion Biotech were sent to the Chandigarh facility for further testing. So it remains to be seen what action will be taken based on the reports which have come out till now. The Uzbek government, the health ministry from Uzbekistan had earlier indicated that the presence of ethylene glycol led to these deaths. So, of course, the presence of the said compound as well as the dosage of the same is something which will be possibly looked at before taking any action against the said company.
Let's move ahead now. Former ICICI Bank MD Chanda Kochar, her husband Deepak Kochar and Videocon Group founder Venugopal Dut have been sent to judicial custody till 10th of January in the ICICI Bank Videocon loan case. Santhya Gora is joining us now with more on this. Santhya.
A Mumbai court has sent Chanda Kochar, Deepak Kochar and Venugopal Dut in judicial custody till 10th of January. CBI today did not seek any further custody of any of these three accused. Now talking about what happened yesterday when these three accused were confronted, sources have told CNBC-TV18 that both the Kochars and even Dut, all three accused repeated what they told the agency day before yesterday, that those 64 crore rupees which were transferred from Videocon International to Deepak Kochar's New Power Renewable Private Limited, that was a genuine business transaction and there's no quid pro quo, angle there. Now, talking about what's likely to happen next week. So next week, regular court will hear different applications filed by these accused, including the applications where these accused have challenged the arrest made by CBI and a quashing of the remand orders.
Let's move forward now. Mama Earth's parent company, Hunasa Consumer, has filed its IPO papers with the market regulator SEBI. The startup plans to raise 400 crore rupees. The 6-year-old company had turned unicorn at the start of 2022. Yash Jain joins us now with more details. Yash.
Well, Ashmit, back in July this year, CNBC-TV18 had reported on Hunasa Consumer, or the parent company of Mama Earth, and its plans to go public. This has finally happened. The company has filed the IPO DRHP with market regulator SEBI. Just to give you a brief overview in terms of what the issue would look like, a fresh issue component of about 400 crore. That is the amount of money which will come into the company through this IPO. A larger share of offer for sale, which is about 4.68 crore shares. And also the company's kept a provision of pre-IPO fundraising of about 80 crore rupees. As far as selling shareholders are concerned, the both promoters, Varun Alag and Ghazal Alag, they will be diluting about 6.8% and 0.21% of the total OFS side. Other selling shareholders, of course, some important private equity players and individuals, Fireside Ventures, Kunal Behel, Rishabh Mariwala, Rohit Bansal, as well as Shilpa Shetty Kundra would be selling part stake through this particular IPO. As far as the proceeds are concerned, finally, about 186 crore out of the total 400 crore coming into the company will be used towards enhancing awareness and brand visibility. About 34 crore would be used towards capex, which is planned over the next 3 years, and investment in B Blunt, which is one of the subsidiary. About 27.5 crores will be spent on that subsidiary, expanding its store network over the next 3 years.
Right, Yash, thanks a lot for that comprehensive picture on that IPO going forward. But that's all the time that we have for. It's a wrap on this edition of Business 360. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. The news and updates will continue on the other side.